AITA for telling my sister the reason her daughter always wants to be at my house is because of how dysfunctional her household is. My sister married about 2.5 years ago, trying to blend her daughter with her husband's kids. This hasn't gone well. The kids have been hostile towards my niece, often making mean comments and showing they don't want her around. I've started inviting my niece over to play, and she loves being at our house. Recently, my sister asked why her daughter prefers being with us. I explained it's because her home was dysfunctional and the other kids hurt her feelings. My sister got married 2.5-ish years ago and blended her daughter, 7, and her husband's son, 12, and daughter, 10, together. Or at least they have wanted to, but it hasn't worked out that way. My sister's daughter had a pretty awful father, and he died when she was a baby. My sister's defended a lot from him until she'd had enough 5 months into her pregnancy and left. So she's not known for making the best decisions all the time, even with support, and she had a lot of it. Her husband's kids don't know their mom, but she's alive and out there somewhere, but doesn't want to know them. I'm not entirely sure how long my sister and her husband were together before they got married, but around 2 years would be my guess. Anyway, it was pretty clear pre-wedding that her husband's kids were not happy at the idea of blending families. They always seemed so hostile when talking to my sister, or any of us, me, parents, other siblings. They would glare at my sister's daughter for no reason other than she was in their line of sight. At the wedding, they kept moving away from everyone and were saying mean things to my sister's daughter when they were asked to sit or stand together. When corrected, they would tell whoever to shut up. They also never want to play with the other kids in our family, even the kids the same age as them. In the time my sister and her husband have been married, my niece has heard that nobody wants her, that the kids would rather die than sit next to her at dinner, that she's not their sibling and they hate her, that her step-siblings would rather be grounded than be in the car at the same time as her, that they'd rather be punished than pass her something. Say she wants the salt or whatever. It happens when they're out too. I was with them once, and the oldest said he was not sitting next to her, looked very disgusted at the very idea of it. They also try to say she smells bad. They act like the other is being punished when sitting next to her. They'll even turn their backs to her and shut her out that way. I started asking my sister if her daughter could come to play with my friends and my wife, and I have loved having her. She comes once or twice a week now, and she always wants to come more. My sister is starting to get annoyed by it, and she asked me yesterday why her daughter is always so eager to be at my house and why she'd rather be at my house than home. I told her it's because her household is dysfunctional, and she has been repeatedly reminded 2 people don't want her there and actively go out of their way to hurt her feelings. I said no kid wants that. She asked me how I could judge and then told me it's really none of my business to comment like that. I reminded her that she asked. She shut down and stormed off. AITA, relevant commenter NTA. Even without asking, someone should tell it bluntly to her. Her kid is hurting and she does nothing? If she wants to stay blind to this issues, I wouldn't be surprised if her daughter runs away the second she could. She is failing her own kid every day now, but I recommend to keep an eye on this situation, as those kids can escalate to violence or endangering your niece. They're going pretty out of way to hurt her just because they are mad at their dad. This won't just go away. OP, it won't, and we keep a careful eye on them. There are times I worry what had happened if my sister and her husband left them alone in the house together. Would they lock her out? Would they prevent her from getting food? Commenter. And as soon as you hear of something like that happening, contact CPS or their equivalent where you're located. OP. That's what we plan to do. CPS might do nothing, we're aware, but if we can start a paper trail if things get to that, we can at least try to help the best we can. Hopefully my sister comes around before that point, but who knows. Story 2. Moving on from early stage emotional affair. About a year ago, my wife, 40F, started texting with an older guy, mid-50s. She met at a sports club. I, 42M, was initially okay with this, as she's outgoing and he's married. I've met him as well, and he was a bit cocky, but cordial to me. Over the next few months, the texting became more frequent, and they did play sports together on a few occasions. I expressed some concern about his intentions, but did not take it seriously as I trusted my wife. Prior to everything, we had a strong marriage for over 10 years and have been together since college. It wasn't perfect. We have the normal growing pains of parenthood. We have young children, and we spend almost all of our free time with them. We go out for dates 1-2 times a month. I'll admit, after having kids, physical intimacy was lacking due to time and stress. I've brought this up, but it was never a major issue. Neither of us has ever cheated. My wife is naturally chatty and charismatic. Many years back, I did catch her flirting and called her for it. There had been no known incidents since. Things didn't cross the line until I went on a business trip, and my wife made plans to see the guy at the sports club while I was away. I sensed that my wife was excited that I was leaving, so she can see him. She did tell me of her plan to see him prior to the trip. However, they decided to change the planned dinner because my wife had an injury. She did communicate the changes to me, so although I was apprehensive, I didn't push back. This led to 2 more meetups the following week, a walk in the park and exploring a night market in his neighborhood. I wasn't happy about it, but I believe my wife wouldn't do anything wrong, as she had still communicated every step with me. She also shared location with me during she was bored and he was available. I was too busy with work to worry. Unbeknownst to me, after their time at the park, the guy admitted to being attracted to my wife. The day after the admission, my wife still went to the night market and got back home past 2 a.m. I was concerned that night and texted her, but she did not reply for a few hours. She did share her location with me while I was away, and she was where she said she was. She eventually replied around 1 a.m. She also let me know when she got back home and sent me pics from the night market. I only found out about the confession the next day after expressing concern about the abnormal amount of time she was spending with him while I was away, and for staying out with a guy one so late. I pressed her on the details, and she trickle-truthed until she finally told me he admitted to having feelings and having a loveless marriage. She swore on our children that she has no feelings for him and that her intentions were purely platonic. She finds him fascinating and good to talk to. She said their hangouts were not at all romantic, and after his admission, she stated clearly to him that she does not have feelings for him. She also swears she would have told me about the admission as soon as I returned. Prior to my trip, I made it clear to my wife that she is free to maintain the friendship as long as he doesn't have any clear intentions. I always suspected he did, but if I wasn't certain, I didn't feel it was right for me to limit her interactions. I found out later I should have been more aware of the amount of communication. The fact that she hid the admission from me and still hung out with him was a big boundary violation. After returning from my trip, we argued about her crossing the line. That night, her and the guy talked about what happened, and they decided to go no contact. This showed me she had some remorse for her actions. She was distant and unhappy that week, and I started to feel bad. Since she swears she did nothing wrong and maintained she had no feelings for him, I told her she can still text him as long as it was limited and transparent. No more one face-to-face contact. In hindsight, this was a terrible idea as it contributed to many more arguments. Over the next few weeks, I started to become obsessed with the details. I was worried that my wife had feelings for him, but could not admit it to herself. My mind was always fraught with questions. I couldn't focus on work or anything else. I don't know if I made it a bigger deal than it was, but I felt like she betrayed our marriage. Although I can't, or don't want to, categorize what she did as cheating, I had all of the angry reactions of a cheated spouse. One moment I wanted her reassurance, the next moment I wanted to avoid her at all cost. I went on a YouTube binge about limerence and emotional affairs. I shared with her a ton of videos to watch, and she watched a few, but she always had an excuse as to why it wasn't applicable to her. I listened to audiobooks about cheating. She ended up getting annoyed that I pestered her to watch or listen content that I thought would help her understand my feelings. I kept wondering that if I did not confront her, the relationship would have evolved into a full-on affair. Prior to this incident, I trusted my wife completely, but the trickle-truthing and the secrecy and the lack of empathy really damaged this. My wife said, prior to me establishing new boundaries, that they texted 30 minutes a day about harmless matters like how their day was, their backgrounds, music, hobbies, and sports. She believes even if the guy was attracted to her, but her intentions were strictly platonic, that her wanting to keep and grow the friendship was not wrong. I disagree with this, as it's basically playing with fire. I feel even if both sides are platonic, that there should still be a wall between two friends of the opposite sex, or in any relationship where the parties can become attracted to each other, that are in committed relationships that shouldn't be crossed, especially if the spouse is uncomfortable with it. It becomes especially complicated when there is attraction on either side. At that point, I believe a fair distance should be kept for the sake of all people involved. Her lack of remorse and lack of awareness became a large source of our arguments. She was sorry for not telling me of the admission, but not sorry for talking or hanging out with him or allowing the friendship to grow to the point the guy started having feelings. She maintains that the type of contact and the amount of contact was not wrong, and that I was conflating the whole situation. Something that bothered me is after she decided to go no contact with the guy, she deleted all of their texts, and there is no cloud backup. She swore on our children that she had no intention of hiding the convos from me. In the moment, she just wanted to move on. She was adamant that she did not flirt or share details of our marriage. The weeks following, our marriage had become rocky due to my mistrust, my frequent questioning, her lack of remorse, and our disagreements on relationship principles and boundaries. She still maintained contact with the guy, but much less frequently. We agreed she should volunteer the context of their conversations to ease my worry, but she never would unless I pried. After a big argument about her not keeping her end of the bargain, I told her she needs to cut contact, and to her credit, she did. Recently, I was going over past phone bills because my bill went up, and I saw that the bills each month were 20+ pages because of excessive texting. It did stop after the no contact was established, but the amount of texting really felt like a healing wound had been ripped open again. There were 3,000+ texts a month and some long phone calls. She told me they talked/texted about 30 minutes a day, but this doesn't equate. I grossly underestimated the amount of contact. The texting was, on some days, all day long, from morning during work and sometimes until late night. When I confronted her with the bills and asked her how she thought this amount of contact with someone of the opposite sex was appropriate. If I talked to another woman this much, would she be okay? She finally apologized for the amount of contact and for allowing the friendship to go too far. This didn't really sit well with me, as she refused to apologize for this until confronted with actual metrics. She still defended her 30-minute estimate as if the conversations were condensed into a continuous conversation instead of spread throughout the day. I really did not accept this as a sincere apology. Whenever I bring concerns up or ask for details of their relationship, it would usually end one of two ways. Either it would escalate to an argument, or my wife would dismiss my concerns as me reading into things too much. I am not great at communicating. I would try to approach the matter as an open discussion, but becomes an interrogation. She would tell me to let it go and stop repeating myself, to just move on and trust her. Move on. After cutting contact with the guy the second time, my wife seemed to move on quickly. I have no reason to believe they are still in contact. She's promised to respect our boundaries and to be fully transparent about her friendships with other men in the future. It seems like, too, we've taken the necessary steps to move on, but the lack of remorse and the deleted texts still bother me, and it's hard to find closure. I believe the friendship didn't move past the initial stages of an emotional affair. I believe she was infatuated with the guy, but not romantically. It was something more in line with an intellectual infatuation, if that is a thing. She said he would compliment her and shower her with validation. She said he was easy to talk to and knowledgeable about many things. I believe my wife's judgment was clouded by this. I don't know what would have happened if I didn't confront her and dig for details. That's something I've struggled to cope with. Would he have kept pursuing her? And would she have eventually slipped up? Would it have evolved into a full-on affair? I've brought this up to her, but she simply dismisses the possibility of her ever cheating. I don't want to be a watchdog over her friendships. I don't want to be wary of her developing these deep, inappropriate relationships with other men. I've never been possessive. My wife has had a handful of pursuers over the years, but they were casual friends. This was different. She played a part in this and doesn't see it that way. She has taken some steps to reassure me she is focused on bettering our marriage. We have sex more often now. She would show more care toward me throughout the day. Small gestures like hugs and snack bags. We are going out together more, and we are generally happy together when this subject is not brought up. I try to suppress my lingering questions because bringing up my concerns will often lead to angry exchanges. But ultimately, not seeing eye to eye on boundaries and accountability is something that bothers me. How can I get her to understand that in a marriage we should be on guard and protect the marriage by all means? How can I build trust in her again? Am I making a bigger deal out of this than it is? This is a needlessly long ramble, so thanks if you read to the end. Appreciate any thoughts or advice. Relevant comment. It's an emotional affair for sure, and there is also a not insignificant possibility that there are more. In such intense communication, it is impossible to think that only one person has feelings for the other, especially if this has been told to the other party and the communication is continued despite this. Also, it is impossible for your wife to not mention her own personal life while that guy was talking so much about his personal and marital problems. This is one of the classic scenarios of cheating stories. One party talks about how shitty their marriage is, even though they are perfect, their spouse treats them badly, is indifferent, etc. The other party is so perfect that the person listening starts to see the shortcomings in their own marriage, why their spouse is not so perfect, how unlucky these two people are to have such spouses, if only they had met earlier. But it is still not too late to be happy, blah blah blah. Contact the wife of that guy. I'm sure she needs to hear how shitty her marriage is because of herself. And I think your wife should admit that it was an affair instead of minimizing it, and prove to you that there was no physical affair. She doesn't get the benefit of the doubt about infidelity, so you can't say she didn't have a physical affair because you don't have proof. Her locations were already in inappropriate times and inappropriate places. But who's to say she wasn't with him at seemingly appropriate times? How can you be sure he wasn't in your home while you were on a work trip? Too bad for her that she deleted the texts. She's ruined any chance of exonerating herself. Or was she guilty already? If she says she can't prove it in any way and all the evidence has somehow disappeared, ask her for a detailed written timeline of her affair to be verified by polygraph. Also, when you inform the guy's wife, you can ask her for texts and any other evidence she can find. Maybe she knows more, or is in a position to find more. Thank you for sticking around until the end. If you liked our videos, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to keep up with our latest content. Have a wonderful day.